Hi, let's discuss the story that we read, our first story, The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell. By now, you have taken the quiz, and your next step will be to participate in the discussion. So hopefully, after you watch this video, and you will have a greater understanding of it, and a lot of things will make more sense. We started with this story. One, it's a really good story. It's very creative. It's very dynamic, but it is pretty easy to follow. We have a single plot here. We have one storyline, and we have two main characters. We have a couple smaller characters. So first, let's talk about what happens. So we have two people, Whitney and Rainsford, and they're in a yacht, and they're going across the ocean to go to Rio to hunt. And they have a discussion about hunting, and they talk about the jaguar, and they're talking about hunter and prey. And here's where we get an example of irony. And so when we get to the main part of the story, we have that Rainsford ends up getting hunted. And so that's very ironic because they have a discussion on that boat, and he says, they don't have feelings, and they talk about fear, and he says, that they don't experience that fear. And so he's looking at hunting from his perspective of, he's the hunter, the animals are the prey, and that's all they are, a prey. They don't have any feelings. They can't get scared, that sort of thing. And so the irony of that is, he ends up being the hunter. And I know it's a different level because he's a human being, but that would be an example of literary irony in this story. So let's continue on. They have that discussion. They're in the boat. He hears some gunshots in a distance. He falls overboard. He ends up in the water, and he ends up on this island. There's a remote island. He ends up on this island. He comes to, he crawls up, and he comes upon this really big house, and he knocks on the door, and we have somebody who answers named Ivan. And Ivan is not very smart, and I think he's being used by General Zaroff here as just kind of his minion, because when he dies, he doesn't show any remorse for that, which does reveal more about his character, that he's got this loyal servant, this loyal quote friend in Ivan, but yet he really acts more upset about his dog dying than his servant, and his reaction to both of those is, I'll have to get a new one, I'll have to train him. And so that gives us more insight as to what his character is like, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But he comes upon this house, and Ivan is not so friendly at first, and then General Zaroff comes down and says, "Welcome, welcome," and he's very welcoming, and he welcomes in his home, and they have this nice dinner. And another example of irony would be, he says, "I know you. I know about you. You're a very well-known hunter. I'm a very good hunter. We have that in common." And so, how ironic is it that out of all the oceans and all the yachts and all the islands and all parts of the world, that this one hunter fell off his boat and ended up on the island of this crazed lunatic. And so that would be another example of irony, that it's pretty ironic that Rainsford ends up knocking on Zaroff's door, and Zaroff knows of Rainsford. And so they are talking about hunting. He talks about how, the different things that they've hunted. And he mentions, and I say Zaroff mentions he was getting bored because he's such a good hunter that he is finding his animals too fast. There's no joy in it anymore, no thrill. And so he presents this idea that they're going to play this game. That's what the whole story is about, this most dangerous game. And his game is to hunt humans. And the way he presents it, and it shows that he is a crazed person, because he presents this idea by acting like Rainsford should be excited about this, that Rainsford should, want to join him on this expedition of hunting humans. And so he doesn't want to do that. And so Zaroff says, "Okay, I'll give you 3 days, and I'm going to hunt you. You have 3 days. I'll give you, if you survive 3 days, you get to go." and you've won the game. And so he starts off, and he gives them food, and he gives them clothing, he gives them everything that he's going to need to hunt, and he sets off. And so we have now that Rainsford is pretty scared, and now he's in his fight or flight type situation, and his nerves take over, and now he finds himself in the same position of that jaguar that he spoke about in the beginning. And so that he immediately gets caught. He's not, his head really is not in the game, because if you think about this from a psychological standpoint, he's trying to survive a murderer. And so of course he's frantic, and he's, it's overwhelming, and he's scared because he obviously doesn't want to die. And so he gets caught immediately, but Zaroff lets him go, because Zaroff, is like, well, that was too easy. And so he knows he's been caught, so he goes back home, starts over, and this is when Rainsford is like, okay, I need to kick it into gear. I've got this game to play, and so you have to think that he's battling this inside here, because while yes he hunts animals, but he's in a situation where he's going to have to kill to survive. So I don't think anybody would want to be in that position. So he's got a lot of things going on in his head here. And so they go on this hunt. One of the dogs dies because he builds a trap. Ivan ends up dying, and so they end up, this is where we get to our climax here, and they're on this on this hill, and when I read it, I just envision it being this beautiful hill with crashing waves coming in at the bottom. And what does Rainsford do? He jumps. So Zaroff is just standing there like, well, that was anticlimactic, because that's not how I wanted this to end. And so he assumes that nobody could survive that fall, and that Rainsford is dead. So he goes back home. And then we get to the very end, and obviously Rainsford is in Zaroff's room, and it ends with Rainsford saying that he's never slept in a more comfortable bed. So he's implying and saying he killed Zaroff because he ended up in his room, and now Rainsford is sleeping in Zaroff's room. So ultimately, at the end of the story, the good guy prevails and the bad guy ends. In this story, we have a lot of different things going on. Your discussion deals with some of these elements, so we have a lot of foreshadowing, and that's what you're going to discuss in your discussion. But think about all of the things that are symbolic in here, and how could those tie in with being foreshadowing? So a few examples could be symbolic would be, they mentioned the blood red waters. And so, he deals with a bloody situation and death and hunting. And so that would be an example of symbolism. Another big example of symbolism, and this is some of this is mentioned in the PowerPoint you can watch, and I want you to watch after you do your discussion, but think of the jungle. The setting here when they get on the island is a jungle. And a jungle is wild and crazy, and this whole idea is wild and crazy. And who lives on the island? Zaroff lives on the island, and Zaroff is crazy. So if we were to analyze these characters, we would obviously say that we have a crazed lunatic murderer, because the way he presents it, it's not like he's going to sneak attack him. He tells him, and he at first expected him to be excited about it and want to play this game. But as we learn, that's not the case, and that doesn't happen. And so just by him thinking that this hunter would want to play such a game, because Rainsford was not his first victim. He mentions all the different people that he's played this game with, and so this has been something that he's been doing for a while. And so if you think of it in the bad guy, good guy sense, we have the good guy killed the bad guy that has been killing other people, so the world is a better place. But think about there's a lot more symbolism. I don't want to have a 30-minute lesson here. You'd probably get bored of hearing me and watching this. But I want you to think about all of the symbolism going on, and a lot of it occurs in the very beginning, from him on the boat, what he hears, what he sees, what he feels. So think about all of those elements as you go into the discussion. And I hope this helped clarify some things, and you will hear from me soon.